Welcome. You have entered a spooky universe where stories never sleep and shadows never fade. Let us blend your like and subscribe into Spooky Universe. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? I have always found that question fascinating because no matter where you are, when the lights go out and the night grows cold, the same darkness finds us all. Let the shadows rise and rule. The last time I crossed the border between the United States and Canada, no one stamped my passport. But something else crossed with me anyway. I grew up near the border, close enough that it was almost a background detail. School trips to the other side, shopping runs, family visits, all of that. You sit in line, you creep forward, you answer the same questions about where you live, where you are going, how long you will stay. You get used to that weird little moment where someone in a uniform holds your documents and decides if you keep going or turn around. By the time this happened, I had done that crossing so many times that it felt almost boring. It was just part of the drive, like a toll booth with extra questions. Maybe that is why I ignored the little warning signs that night. I thought I knew the border. I thought it was just a place on a map. I did not think about what it really is. A thin strip of land where two countries meet and overlap. Two sets of laws, two systems, and a piece in the middle that does not fully belong to either. They call that space between the booths no man's land as a joke. But I do not think it is a joke anymore. This happened in late autumn. That in-between weather where the evenings come early and the air smells like wet leaves and cold metal. I had a friend who had rented a cabin on the Canadian side for a long weekend. The plan was simple. I would finish work, pack my bag, drive up late, cross at one of the smaller ports to avoid the daytime traffic, and be at the cabin before sunrise. I chose the small crossing on purpose. Everybody in my town complained about the main one. The busy lanes of cars, the commercial trucks, the slow-moving line of brake lights. The smaller crossing was farther out, in a stretch of forest and low hills, but people online said it was usually empty, especially at night. Better views, less hassle. That sounded perfect. I left just after dinner with a coffee in the cup holder and the address of the cabin saved in my navigation app. For a while, the drive felt normal. Streetlights, familiar signs, that mix of excitement and nerves you get at the start of a trip. Then the towns thinned out. The streetlights ended. The road narrowed and began to wind a little, climbing through stretches of trees. No billboards, no gas stations, just the occasional faded sign with a moose silhouette and a warning about watching for wildlife. My phone signal flickered out to nothing. The navigation app downloaded the route beforehand, but the little blue arrow began to move in a slightly drunk way, jumping a few meters to the side and then back again, like even the map was having trouble keeping track of where I really was. After about an hour of that, I passed a sign that said the border was ahead. First warning, 20 kilometers. The sign after that said 10. The last one just said, International Border. Be prepared to stop. The trees opened a little. The sky seemed bigger. I caught a glimpse of dark shapes of mountains far off and a band of pale cloud. The only light came from my own headlights, and, now and then, a far-off tower beacon blinking red on some unseen peak. No other cars. None behind me, none ahead of me. Just my engine and the rush of tires on cold pavement. Have you ever realized, all at once, that you are very far from help? Not in a dramatic way, just in that quiet, practical sense where you know that if your car stopped, you would be standing on a dark road in a forest with no signal, no houses, no sidewalks, nothing. That thought brushed my mind and moved on. I took another sip of coffee, adjusted my grip on the wheel, and told myself it would be fine. I had done lonelier roads than this. Then I saw the border. It appeared around a gentle curve, almost suddenly, a pool of yellow and white light in the dark. On my side, the United States side, there was a low building with a flat roof, a canopy over 2 lanes, and that familiar little line of orange cones guiding you to the right. A flag on a tall pole, hanging limp in the still air. On the other side, across a short stretch of asphalt and painted lines, I could see the Canadian building. It looked similar from a distance, another rectangle of light and glass and concrete. Between the two, that bare strip of road, empty and quiet. There was no line of cars like everyone had promised. Both crossings were almost too quiet. I pulled into the lane, slowed to a crawl, and rolled down my window. The air that came in was colder than I expected, with a faint smell of wet pine. There was one officer in the booth. He sat forward when I pulled up, the way they do, hands folded on the edge of the window. He looked a little older than the usual officers I got at the busy crossing. Thick gray at his temples, weathered lines at the corners of his eyes. A face that had seen a lot of cars and a lot of nights. He greeted me, asked the usual questions in a low, steady voice. Citizenship. Where are you headed? How long will you be staying? Anything to declare? I handed him my passport. He took it and scanned it without looking down right away. Instead, he studied my face for a moment, as if comparing it to something he already knew, rather than checking the little photo inside. That look lingered on me half a second longer than it needed to. Then he glanced down at the screen in front of him. The device on his desk flickered with a pale light that painted his eyes. He hummed once, a quiet sound in his throat, and then slid my passport back to me. "You know this crossing closes overnight most days," he said. "You are lucky tonight." I blinked. I had checked the hours online earlier, and it had shown 24 hours for passenger vehicles. I told him that. He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something in my words that I did not hear. Then he shrugged one shoulder. "Sometimes the system says one thing, and the road says another," he answered. "You have a place to be, right? A cabin." The way he said cabin made it sound specific. Not just any cabin, but the one I had in mind. I nodded. A friend had messaged me the coordinates, but I had not mentioned that to him. He watched me for another second. Then his voice changed slightly, just a small drop in tone, the way people do when they shift from professional to personal. He told me that between his booth and the Canadian one, I should not stop. Not for anything. If the car behind me flashed its lights, if I thought I heard something in the trees, if I saw someone in the road. "Do not stop," he said. "Go straight to the Canadian officer and finish your crossing." It struck me as odd, but it also sounded like something they might say because of some weird security program. Maybe they had trouble with people wandering around in the middle section. I nodded again, said, "Sure, no problem." He leaned his elbow on the counter like he was worn out. Then he added one more thing. He told me that if, for some reason, the Canadian side seemed closed when I reached it, I should not turn around in that middle space. Do not circle. Do not wait there. If that happened, he said, I should come all the way back to his booth, even if the light above his lane was red and the sign said, "Closed." His words got very carefully spaced when he said that. I tried to make a joke, something weak about hoping the neighbors were still awake. He did not really smile. He just gave this small, tired twist of his mouth and nodded me forward. The light above my lane turned green. The barrier arm lifted. I rolled up my window, put the car in gear, and eased away from his booth. The instant I left the little pool of bright light under the canopy, the world felt different. The middle section between the two stations is not very long. I have crossed at busy places where it is just a matter of a handful of car lengths. You blink and you are under the next set of lights. Here, though, it felt stretched. My headlights showed me a straight strip of road, white lines bright against the black asphalt. On either side, a low metal guardrail ran along the edge of a shallow ditch. Beyond that, trees pressed close. Tall, dark shapes crowded together, turning the edges of my vision into a wall of shadows. No lights from the Canadian side seemed to reach me. I drove at the posted speed, not wanting to give either country a reason to fuss at me. The United States booth receded in my mirror, shrinking, its lights softer and smaller. I glanced ahead, expecting to see the Canadian building grow larger in front of me. Instead, I saw more of the same unbroken road. The border building was there. I knew it was. I had seen it from the other side. But now that I was in this narrow strip of in-between, the other station felt farther away than it should have been. My radio, which I had turned down for the crossing, began to hiss softly. I had left it on some regular music station, but now the sound that came through was a low static, almost like breath. A shape flickered between the trees on my right, just on the edge of my vision. Tall, pale, gone the second I tried to focus. Then another on the left, lower, hunched. My grip tightened on the wheel. I told myself it was just tricks of light and darkness after a long drive. I checked my mirror without really meaning to. The booth behind me looked a little different. The light over my lane was no longer green. It was red, glowing steadily. The interior lights seemed dimmer, too. I could not see the officer at all. I glanced forward again. Now the Canadian building was visible, finally, but it still looked too far away for how long I felt I had been driving. Its lights were a dull yellow, not as bright as I had expected. The whole place looked a little fogged, like I was looking at it through a dirty window. The radio hiss changed. For a second, it sounded like someone trying to talk just under the noise, their voice thin and far away. I reached out to adjust the dial, and the noise cut out completely. For a few heartbeats, there was nothing but the soft roar of my tires and the tick of the engine. Then another sound joined in. It came from outside, not from the car. A heavy rolling noise, like another vehicle on the road behind me. I looked in the mirror again. Headlights. 2 white dots had appeared in the distance behind me, where the middle section met the lights of the booth I had left. The lights brightened, flared briefly, as if the driver had switched beams, then settled at a steady intensity, closing the distance faster than they should have been able to, given the way the road had stretched. The instinct to slow down, to let them pass, to be a normal, polite driver, rose automatically. Then I heard the officer's words again in my head. Do not stop. Do not stop for anything in between. The car behind me drew closer until its lights filled my rear window. They were bright enough that I could not see the shape of the vehicle itself, just a vague, dark outline. It stayed right on my bumper, too close, the way aggressive drivers do when they want to push you faster. Except my speedometer already read a little over the limit. I kept my eyes on the Canadian building, now getting closer in a more normal way. I told myself this was just some local who knew the road better than me and was annoyed at a cautious outsider. Then the car behind me flashed its high beams. Once, twice, 3 times. a signal. The kind of thing people do on dark roads to warn you of something ahead. In the forest back home, people would sometimes flash a warning if there was a deer by the shoulder or a speed trap around the next bend. The urge to tap my brakes and pull slightly to the side, to roll my window down just a crack and signal a question with my hand, almost overpowered me. Instead, I gripped the wheel tighter, kept my gaze straight ahead, and pressed the gas just enough to edge my speed up. The car behind me did not fall back. It stayed close, its lights glaring in my mirror, flashing again. My heartbeat picked up in that unpleasant way that feels like a hand closing around your chest. I tried to tell myself a story. Maybe the Canadian side really was closing, and this person knew it. Maybe they were trying to tell me to turn around. Maybe I was being stubborn and stupid for ignoring a helpful local. But then, why did my skin feel cold? Why did the hairs on the back of my neck insist that something was wrong? The Canadian building was close enough now that I could see more details. The lanes were marked with overhead signs: cars, buses, trucks. The booths under the canopy were lit, but I could not see anyone moving inside. The barrier arms were down. My stomach dropped. The light over the lane for passenger vehicles was red. Beside it, a sign glowed with a simple message: closed. In that moment, it felt like the whole world pinched inward. I remembered the officer's warning not to turn around in the middle, not to circle there. Behind me, the following car flashed its high beams again, more insistently now. The sound of its engine rose as the driver revved, a low growl overlapping with mine. I reached the point where the no man's land met the edge of the Canadian station. Lines of paint crossed the pavement there, a little word in one direction, a space, then the name of the country in another. I rolled almost to the barrier arm without meaning to. The booths up ahead were empty, chairs pushed back, computer screens off or dark. The whole place had that early morning stillness you see in closed offices. My first instinct was to pull to the side, stop, hazard lights on, and figure out what to do. But the memory of that officer's voice was not leaving me alone. If it seems closed, come all the way back. Do not wait in the middle. The car behind me changed its behavior. Instead of riding my bumper, it drifted to the side a little, headlights sliding in my mirror like it was preparing to pull past me on the narrow road. Except there was not really room to pass, not without scraping along the barrier or dipping into the ditch, unless the driver did not care about that. I did something that felt ridiculous and dangerous at the same time. I put the car in reverse. The tires squealed a little on the cold pavement as I eased backward, hands tight on the wheel, eyes flicking from the mirror to the road behind. The following car did not move at first. It just sat there, lights burning into my eyes. For a heartbeat, we faced each other, nose to nose, on that narrow stretch of border road. Me rolling slowly backward, it holding position like some kind of test. Then, without any movement in between, without the gradual shift cars usually make, it seemed a few meters farther away. Just a jump. Like someone had cut out the frames of it rolling. My breath stuttered. I kept reversing, my speedometer needle quivering near nothing, until the Canadian station was shrinking in front of me. The barrier arm stood between us, pale and solid. The sign above it still glowed closed. The car behind me followed now, matching my speed. Its lights stayed level, not gaining, not dropping back. The middle stretch felt even longer on the way back. The trees pressed closer, or maybe that was just my mind. The air seemed thicker, heavier, like I was driving through water instead of air. Shapes moved in the woods. Sometimes I thought I saw someone walking parallel to the road, just within the tree line. Sometimes it was something on all fours. Always gone when I tried to focus. The radio, still silent, crackled once. A fragment of a voice pushed through, just 2 dark words in a language I did not recognize, then nothing. I did not realize I had been holding my breath until my chest started to hurt. I forced myself to inhale, slow, steady, refusing to let panic drive the car instead of me. The United States booth finally came into view again, its canopy a square of light floating ahead. The red light over my lane still glowed. The open sign was dark. I did not know what would happen if I pulled up there. I did not know if the officer would be there, or if I would find an empty box or a locked gate. But I knew, very clearly, that I could not stay in the strip of road between. As I neared the booth, the following car finally did something different. It slowed. Its headlights grew smaller in my mirror. The sound of its engine faded. When I glanced back, it had stopped right at the boundary where the in-between space met the edge of the Canadian station. It sat there, idling, lights fixed on me, making no move to turn around or approach the booths at either end. A part of me wanted to stare at it, to try to see the driver, to memorize the plate. The smarter part of me kept my eyes on the booth ahead. The canopy light washed over my hood as I rolled under it. The world felt suddenly normal again, in a way that made my stomach flip. The red light over my lane flickered, then turned green as I reached the window. The shutter of the booth slid open with a mechanical sound. The same officer as before leaned forward. Same gray at the temples, same tired lines near the eyes. "You came back," he said. The exact words, as if I had just gone to run an errand and returned, not driven through some stretched-out strip of nowhere in the middle of the night. I told him the Canadian side looked closed. I told him the barrier was down. There were no officers, and that another car had tried to push me to stop in between. His mouth tightened at the corners. He glanced over my shoulder, his eyes moving past me toward the middle space. For a second, his gaze sharpened, like he was looking at something that was not just the usual strip of pavement. Then his shoulders dropped. He told me to put the car in park. He asked for my passport again. I handed it over with fingers that did not feel entirely steady. He scanned it, eyes on the little screen. The glow painted his face an odd color. After a moment, he said something that chilled me more than the whole drive had managed. He asked me how many times I had crossed tonight. I frowned, told him just the once, or maybe 1.5 if he counted my partial attempt toward Canada. I tried to make it a joke. My voice sounded thin in my own ears. He did not look amused. He turned the screen slightly, just enough that I could catch a glimpse. I did not see everything, just part of the display, but I noticed there was a line with a log of scans and movements. Entry, exit, secondary inspection, that kind of thing. Next to my name, there were not 1 but 3 little timestamps listed under the column for attempted crossing in the last segment. 3 separate entries, all marked within the last hour, all showing movement between the same 2 ports of entry. I stared at the screen. I had only been through once. I had seen the booths once each, one on the way there, one on the way back. He watched me closely, weighing my reaction. "There are nights," he said quietly, "when this place does not like to decide which side you belong on." I did not know if he meant the road, or the forest, or the border itself. The way he said it, I suspected it did not matter. He told me that the small crossings were tricky sometimes. They could feel longer than they were, easier to get turned around. I thought about the car that had stopped at the very edge and did not follow me all the way. I thought about the way it had seemed to jump distance, the shapes in the trees, the barrier arm on the far side, down and unmoving. I asked him about the hours for the Canadian station. He said officially they were open all night for passenger vehicles. He also said that sometimes, on certain nights, they cleared the lanes early and let the automatic system handle the data until dawn. I asked what I was supposed to do. I still needed to get across. My friend was waiting at a cabin on the other side, or at least I hoped they were. His eyes softened a little at that, the way people do when they see that mix of tired and stubborn. He told me that if I still wanted to cross, I was free to try again. But, he added, if I did, I had to do one thing differently. He said that when I left his booth this time, I should not look in the mirror. Not once. Not until I was fully under the canopy on the other side. Not if I heard something behind me. Not if I thought someone was calling my name. He emphasized that last part. If you think you hear your own voice, he said, keep your eyes on the road. I swallowed hard enough that my throat hurt. I had not told him about the strange static on my radio or the half-heard words. He handed my passport back and hit a button that turned his light green again. Last chance to just go home, he said, more gently this time. There was a moment where I almost told him yes. I would go back the way I came, text my friend later, and explain something vague about traffic or car trouble or not feeling well. I could sleep in my own bed and forget this strange stretch of night. But there was another part of me, the same reckless sliver that had agreed to a long drive after a full workday, that refused to let this border decide for me. I told him I would try again. He nodded once, as if he had expected that answer, and raised the barrier. The car felt different as I pulled away. Heavier, like it remembered the last trip and was not excited about repeating it. This time, as soon as I left the canopy, I fixed my eyes on the center of the road ahead and refused to move them. The temptation to check the mirror was strong. It is such an automatic habit when you drive, glancing up every few seconds. I had to fight myself constantly, like wrestling with an invisible hand on my chin. The forest tightened around me. I could feel, without seeing, that there were things pacing the car, shapes that matched my speed just inside the tree line. Every nerve in my neck screamed that if I looked to the side, I would see a face pressed against the glass without any body attached. The radio stayed completely dead this time. Somewhere between the booths, I heard my own voice. It came from just behind my left ear, exactly where the rear seat begins. It sounded a little breathless, as if I had just been laughing or running. It said my name in the tone I use when I am annoyed with myself, the way I do when I spill coffee or miss an exit. Then it said something else. It told me I was going the wrong way. Every muscle in my body jerked toward the mirror. I almost snapped my head back. Instead, I clenched my jaw and kept my gaze on that thin, bright stripe of paint dividing the lanes. My hands ached from how tight I held the wheel. The voice behind me grew a little sharper, a little more desperate, matching my own when I am tired and frustrated. It told me the Canadian side was closed, that the officer had said so, that I needed to turn around while I still could. It felt like arguing with myself inside my head, except the sound was outside, vibrating the air in the car. Do you know that feeling when someone calls your name in a crowd and you know instantly whether they know you or are faking it? There is a certain weight to your name in the mouths of people who really know who you are. This voice had that weight. If the officer had not warned me, I think I would have listened. I would have pulled to the side, put the car in reverse again, glanced back, and maybe never made it to either booth. Instead, I forced my foot to stay pressed exactly where it was. I could feel sweat between my shoulder blades despite the cold. The Canadian station came into view. This time, as I approached, I could see that one of the booths had a figure inside. A shape behind the glass, seated, waiting. The barrier arms still looked down from a distance, but as I drew closer, I saw that it was actually half raised, angled, as if it was in the process of letting me through. The voice behind me grew more agitated. It begged now. It told me that the officer did not understand, that sometimes the middle strip folded over on itself, and that if I drove all the way through, I would not find the cabin, or the road, or the rest of the world. I could not tell if that last part was a threat or a warning. I reached the painted line where the middle space meets the Canadian territory. At that exact point, the voice cut off. The air in the car thinned. I felt something leave. For a heartbeat, the silence roared. Then I rolled under the second canopy, into the wash of its lights. The booth window slid open. A Canadian officer leaned out, younger than the one on the other side, with a neutral expression and a steaming mug of something in his hand. He greeted me, asked where I was coming from, where I was headed, how long I planned to stay. The usual script. His breath fogged in the cold. My hands still trembled faintly as I handed over my passport. He scanned it and frowned in concentration at his screen. For a moment, I thought there would be some problem, some record from the other side, some note about my strange back and forth. Instead, he just nodded, handed the passport back, and told me to have a good trip. I stared at him for a second, waiting for some hint that he felt what I had just driven through. Some sign that the system had flagged my 3 attempts in the logs. He did not seem bothered by anything. The lane lights ahead of me were green, the road beyond the station ordinary. I could have asked him if they had closed early. I could have asked if he had seen my car approach, then turn back, then arrive again. I did not. I thanked him, rolled forward, and did not look back until I had driven far enough that the station was just a glow in the distance. The road on the Canadian side felt normal. Trees, reflective signs, the occasional farmhouse set back from the road with a faint light in the window. My phone picked up a signal again, and the navigation app woke up, cheerfully recalculating the route to the cabin. The rest of the drive was almost boring. I reached the cabin just before dawn, the sky a pale rim behind the dark trees. My friend met me at the door, bleary-eyed and wrapped in a blanket, joking that I had taken my time. I laughed it off, said something about missing a turn and having to loop back. It was easier then, telling him that I might have been driving in a strip of space that did not quite belong to either flag. We spent the weekend at the lake, hiking and cooking and staying up too late. My body shook off the tension of that night pretty quickly. At least, I thought it had. It was not until I drove back home a few days later that I realized how wrong things were. This time, I chose the big, busy port of entry, the one with the multiple lanes and the clearly marked plazas and the shops. I figured more people, more lights, less chance of getting stuck in some strange stretch of nowhere. The crossing back was uneventful. I fell into the familiar dance of questions and answers, handed over my passport, and smiled at the jokes about souvenirs. When I got home that evening, my parents asked how the trip had been. I told them about the cabin, the lake, the cold mornings. I did not mention the border. Later that night, out of simple curiosity, I logged into the online system where you can check your recent crossings. They have a database that shows entries and exits, useful for travel records. I entered my details and pulled up the last week. It showed my return crossing at the busy port, just as it should. Date, time, location. It did not show any record of my entry a few nights before, through the small crossing in the forest. Nothing at all for that night. I tried the Canadian side, their own traveler log. Same result. It had my exit through the big port, but nothing about the late night arrival. According to both systems, I had never officially entered Canada that weekend. I had just appeared there somehow, spent a few days, and then left. I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe the officer at the small crossing had forgotten to finalize the entry. Maybe the system had gone down for a few hours. It happens. But then, I thought about the screen on the United States side, showing 3 attempts to cross when I knew I had only driven through once. Something about that mismatch sat wrong in my stomach. For a while, I tried to forget about it. Life went on. Work, bills, errands. The border faded from my mind. Then, one rainy afternoon a couple of months later, I was cleaning out my car and found something that did not belong. It was a small strip of paper, crumpled and wedged between the side of the passenger seat and the center console. I do not remember stuffing any trash down there. I reached in, pinched it between my fingers, and pulled it out. The paper was thin, like the kind used in printers or old receipt machines. On one side, faint, nearly rubbed away, was a line of text. It was not in English or French or any language I recognized. The letters were spidery and strange, curved and broken in ways that made my eyes want to slide off them. On the other side, stamped in ink that had bled slightly into the fibers, was a simple symbol. A straight, horizontal line. A short vertical stroke crossing it in the center. A border. A marker. A division. The ink felt dry under my thumb, but the paper itself felt warm, as if it had been sitting near some hidden source of heat. I should have thrown it away. I should have crumpled it tighter and tossed it in the trash with all the old coffee cups and receipts. Instead, without fully knowing why, I slid it into the back of my passport. It sits there now, pressed between my country's seal and my picture. A little divide inside a booklet that is already full of lines and stamps and crossings. I have not gone back to that small crossing since. If I need to cross the border now, I drive farther, stand in the long line of brake lights at the big port, answer the same questions from bored officers surrounded by hundreds of other travelers. The idea of turning onto that lonely forest road at night makes my skin feel too tight. Sometimes, late, when I cannot sleep, I take out my passport and hold it in my hands. I can feel the faint outline of that warm paper inside. I wonder where exactly I was for that stretch of road between the 2 booths. I wonder how many times I really crossed, and how many times the border itself tried to keep me in the middle. Have you ever crossed from one country into another at night and felt, just for a second, that the world narrowed down to a single lane and a single decision? That if you turned at the wrong moment or looked into the wrong mirror, you might never quite reach either side. If you ever find yourself on a small border road between the United States and Canada, under a sky full of indifferent stars, and the officer tells you not to stop in no man's land, listen carefully. Because there are places on that line where the systems do not quite match. Where your passport might not record your steps, but something else does. Where your own voice can come back to you with suggestions that feel a little too tempting. And if you hear yourself from behind, if your name comes floating out of the back seat in the exact tone you use when you doubt yourself, keep your eyes forward. You may not always get to choose which side of the border you end up on, but you can choose not to live in the space between. Story number 2. I will tell you something I never put on any application form or background check. I did not quit my job at the border for better pay or better hours. I quit because one night, at a tiny US and Canada crossing in the middle of nowhere, I watched a car come through a lane that did not exist anymore. And I am still not sure which side of the line I ended up on. I grew up in a border town, not one of the big glamorous ports with tourist lines and duty-free shops glowing all night. Mine was a place where the border was just there, the way a river is there, or a row of trees, or a worn-out fence. You could stand in a field and see white markers stretching off into the distance, little stone or metal pillars with one country on one side and the other on the opposite face. As kids, we would ride our bikes along the rural roads and joke about how if you put one foot on each side of a marker, you were in both countries at once. It felt like a game, a dare. The grown-ups would warn us not to cross outside of the official points, not because anything dramatic would happen, but because the paperwork would be annoying. That was the worst they could imagine when it came to borders. Annoying paperwork. Life being what it is, I ended up working there. Not at the big port an hour away, but at a small rural crossing where traffic was light and the air always smelled like pine, dust, or snow, depending on the season. The pay was decent, the benefits solid, and the schedule was the usual rotating mix of early mornings, afternoons, and graveyard shifts. It was not glamorous, but it was steady. Our little port had 2 lanes for cars, one on each side of a narrow dividing island. On the US side, our building was a low rectangle of concrete and glass with a flat roof, the flag out front, and a line of cameras and sensors tucked into the metal bones above the lanes. Across the in-between zone, on the Canadian side, there was a very similar building, a little newer maybe, but close enough that if you blurred your eyes, the whole thing looked like a reflection in some invisible mirror. Farther to the west, hidden by trees and a slight bend in the highway, there was something else. An old crossing. It had been shut down years before I started working there, after a landslide had taken a bite out of the connecting road on the Canadian side. They closed the lane, rerouted traffic, and eventually built the newer port where I ended up. Locals still called that closed stretch the old line. Sometimes, when the weather was clear and the shift was slow, you could walk out behind our building, follow a narrow maintenance path, and see it. A cracked slab of pavement leading into weeds, a rusting barrier arm frozen at a permanent angle, and beyond that, the shadow of the old booth on the Canadian side, mostly dismantled now, just a concrete pad and a few bolts. The system still knew about it though. Buried in the software we used every day were old labels and codes that referred to lanes that no longer existed. If you dug around in the right menus, you could still find drop-downs for positions no one had manned in years. In my first week, my supervisor, an officer named Dawson, gave me the usual tour. Cameras, radios, panic buttons, the secure drawer with the forms, the log-in and log-out procedures. He pointed at the old line on the monitor once, a tiny gray label in a corner of the screen. "That lane is locked out," he said. "You will never have to use it." He said it with the casual tone of someone brushing aside an irrelevant detail. But I noticed he did not look at the monitor when he said it. His eyes stayed on me, just a little too long. I wrote it off as first-week nerves. I had a lot to learn, and the border is one of those places where people take rules very seriously. If some lane was off limits, and they made a point of telling the new kid, that was just part of the culture. No big deal. For a while, My job was exactly what you would expect. Daytime shifts meant a mix of locals, tourists, and the occasional person who was very sure they knew the rules better than you. Night shifts meant long stretches of nothing, broken up by sudden little flurries of headlights as a few stragglers rolled through. You learn the rhythm of it. You get used to the questions. Citizenship. Where are you headed? How long will you be staying? Anything to declare? You see people at their calmest and at their most nervous, often for reasons that have nothing to do with you or your country. Sometimes people are just scared of being looked at. Sometimes they are scared because they know they should be. I do not know exactly when the first strange thing happened, because at first, it did not feel very strange at all. It was a slow night in early winter, the kind of cold where the air feels thin and metallic in your lungs, and every breath comes out as a pale cloud. Snow had fallen a few days earlier, and then partially melted, leaving crusts of ice along the edges of the pavement and a gray, slushy line where the road met the shoulder. I was on the overnight shift with Dawson. He was the senior for that night, sitting at the main desk in the back room where the monitors and computers hummed. I was in the booth out front, under the canopy, watching the empty lanes. The sky had that heavy, low look that means more snow is thinking about arriving. The light over the Canadian side shimmered slightly in the drifting moisture, casting a faint halo onto the in-between zone. I remember how quiet it was. Even the radio chatter from other ports along the region was thin. Most drivers had chosen to cross at larger stations earlier in the evening. Our lonely little port was left to the owls and the occasional trucker. I was staring at the borderline painted on the asphalt when the computer chimed. It was a soft alert, the one that tells you a license plate has been captured by the system somewhere in your zone. Usually that happens as a car approaches, the camera picking up the plate at a distance and running it through the database before the driver even rolls up to your window. Only this time, there was no car in sight. The monitor on my desk woke up, switching from a rotating feed of camera views to a notification window. It showed a plate number, a model, and a color. Sedan, dark blue. Below that, in smaller letters, the lane. Old line. For a second, my mind did not process it. It was the middle of the night. My coffee had cooled to a sad lukewarm in its mug, and the soft hum of the heater had lulled me into that half-awake, half-dreaming state. Then I read it again and felt a small, tight knot form just under my ribs. Old line. The lane that was supposed to be locked. The lane leading to the broken road and the dismantled booth. I thought it was a glitch. Software can be strange, especially when old code is sitting under new patches. Maybe a camera label was misconfigured. Maybe someone had tagged the wrong position. I toggled the camera feeds manually. Lane 1, empty. Lane 2, empty. Wide shot of the in-between zone, empty. I clicked on the maintenance cameras, the ones that pointed toward the back lot and the path that led toward the old crossing. For a moment, the screen was black, and I thought the camera was down. Then it flickered and cleared. I saw a strip of the old pavement, half buried under snow and weeds. I saw the rusted shape of the barrier arm, frozen halfway up like a hand caught in an incomplete wave. I saw trees beyond, thick and dark. No car. I was about to call back to Dawson and ask if he had seen the alert when his voice crackled over the booth intercom. "You saw that, right?" he said. He always had this dry way of talking, like nothing surprised him. But there was a weird tightness around the edges of his words now. I answered that I had. Old line, blue sedan, no visuals. He told me to ignore it. The camera must be throwing ghosts, he said. Happens when the temperature bounces around. His tone said to drop it, at least for the moment. So I did. The alert cleared itself after a minute, and the monitors went back to their slow rotation of quiet, empty lanes and snowmelt. But the next night, during another stretch of graveyard silence, it happened again. Same soft chime, same type of car, same lane, old line. This time, though, there was a second line on the alert. It said, direction, northbound. The night after that, the alert popped up again. Direction, southbound. A single car, at least according to the system, had crossed the border on a road that was not supposed to be open, in one direction and then the other, within less than half an hour. No one on either side had spoken to a driver. No cameras had shown a physical vehicle. The system knew it, though. Somewhere in the invisible circuits and buried code, a line of data had been written that said an older blue sedan had used that lane. I started checking the logs on my brakes. The border keeps records of everything. Every plate that passes under a camera. Every badge that logs into a terminal. Every time a barrier arm goes up or down. Most officers only use that information when there is a problem, a dispute, or some training scenario. I was new and curious, with too much free time on nights when almost no one crossed. I discovered that the old line had not been as locked out as I thought. The logs went back years, probably farther than I would ever have the patience to scroll. But just in the last handful of winters, I saw a pattern. Every so often, usually on cold nights, usually in the deepest part of the shift when the world was as quiet as it gets, a car would appear in the system on the old line. A few times it was a pickup. Once, a small hatchback. Recently, though, it was always a dark blue sedan. Similar plate each time, varying by a letter or two. Every entry was marked as automatic. No officer name attached, no note, no secondary inspection. You know how when you are at home, sometimes you hear a sound in an empty room, and you go check and find nothing, and you laugh it off. But if you start hearing it every night around the same time, in the same way, it stops being funny. That was how those entries felt. I finally asked Dawson about it when he was in a good mood. During a slow afternoon, when the winter sun made weak attempts to brighten the concrete. He listened, then gave me this long look. "You know why they built the new port here?" he said. I told him it was because of the landslide on the Canadian side, how it messed up the old road alignment. That was the official story anyway. He nodded. Then he shook his head. "That was part of it," he said. "The other part is that sometimes, with these little crossings, you get more than you bargained for." He said it without any drama, just setting the words down between us like paperwork. He told me that years before I signed on, before the new port, before the landslide, there had been a time when things at the old crossing got weird. Not in a movie way, not with glowing lights and swirling portals, but in small, persistent ways that made the people working there feel like they were living inside a glitch. Cars that the system said had crossed, but no one remembered. Names appearing on logs with no faces attached to them. People insisted they had crossed at that station when their plates showed up in another state entirely at the same time. He said that one winter, there was a family in a blue sedan that never showed up on either side's records after they entered the in-between zone. The cameras should have shown them leaving, but the footage cut from their car rolling forward to an empty road. Searches turned up nothing. The story never really made the news. It was one of 1,000 quiet tragedies that get swallowed by bureaucracy and distance. Not long after that, the landslide happened. The road was damaged. The decision was made to relocate the crossing slightly east and completely overhaul the systems. "You could say it was all coincidence," he said, with that same dry voice. "Or you could say the border decided it did not like that line anymore." Then he fixed me with a steady look and added one more thing. "If you ever see that old lane light up on your console during a shift, you call me first. Do not try to handle anything alone. And if you are ever out back and you hear a car on pavement where there should not be a road, you do not go looking. You come inside." He left it at that. I tried to file it away as a local superstition. Every place has its stories. You could work in any station long enough, and someone would tell you about the weird night when something did not add up. But after that conversation, I noticed other small details. Sometimes, when the weather was changing and the clouds hung low over the trees, the cameras would flicker for a heartbeat. The feed that normally showed the backlot would, for a fraction of a second, show a different angle, an older booth, a different style of canopy, a flag with a design that looked almost right, but not quite. Then it would blink back to normal, leaving me blinking as if I had dozed and dreamed it. Sometimes, the automatic speaker in the lane, the one we used to talk to drivers through the glass, would crackle softly when no one was there. If you listened closely, it sounded almost like a voice trying to get through on a channel just off from ours. And always, in the logs, the old line had those ghost entries. If you were listening to this with headphones on, in the dark, you might be thinking you would have quit right there, that you would never have set foot in that little port again. But when you are actually living it, it is easier to shrug and go on. There are bills to pay and schedules to keep. We get very good at explaining the strange way. The night that changed things started like any other winter graveyard. The forecast had called for snow that might turn into freezing rain. Clouds had rolled in early, turning the late afternoon gray and flat. By the time I signed in for my shift, the world outside the windows was a swirl of tiny flakes. Most sane people had done their traveling earlier. The cameras showed only the occasional set of headlights drifting through the white. We processed a few late crossings, mostly local plates, people who knew the roads and wanted to get home before the weather turned worse. By midnight, it was just Dawson and me. He was in the back room, watching a hockey game on a muted television while keeping an eye on the monitors. I was in the booth, heater humming, coffee cooling, snow piling up in soft ridges along the edges of the lanes. The Canadian side looked even more deserted than ours. Their building had that sealed, warm look you get when everyone is inside and no one is coming or going. Their lane lights glowed green out of habit, but no cars approached. In between was a tunnel of swirling flakes under the sodium lamps, the borderline on the pavement already fuzzed by snow. Have you ever looked at a line on the ground and felt, just for a second, that it was more real than the people standing on either side of it? More stubborn, more permanent. Like if everyone left, the line would stay. That was how it looked that night. The paint in the snow, a suggestion of a division the world had agreed to believe in. Somewhere around the deep part of the night, the part where your body starts to think about sleep No matter how much caffeine you throw at it, the system chimed. I knew that sound by then, just from the pitch and rhythm. It was not the sharp alert of an alarm. It was the soft, almost polite tone of a new entry in the logs. I glanced at the screen and saw exactly what I expected. Old line, plate, dark blue sedan. Direction, northbound. Before I could call it in, 2 more entries appeared beneath it in quick succession. Same lane, same car. Direction, southbound. Then another, and another. It was like watching a flipbook of a car driving back and forth over an invisible point. Old line, northbound. Old line, southbound. Old line, northbound. Each entry was marked with a timestamp, separated by only a handful of seconds. Far too fast for any real car to be turning around on a closed road lined with concrete blocks and snowbanks. My skin went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. The intercom hissed softly, and Dawson's voice came over it, tighter than I had ever heard it. "Stay in the booth," he said. "Just watch the main lanes. Do not go out back." I asked him what was happening, even though I could see it on my screen. He told me the system sometimes got loops. That was the word he used. Loops. Like some old bit of code was stuck replaying an entry from years ago, echoing it into the present. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But then the ground shook. It was subtle at first, a faint vibration under my feet, just enough to make the coffee in my cup ripple. Then it deepened into a low, rolling sensation, like distant thunder translated through concrete. The cameras on their poles shivered. Tiny drops of melted snow slipped from their housings and caught the light as they fell. I heard it next. Not the usual hiss of tires on wet pavement you get near a road, but the sound of compressed, packed snow being pushed aside. The familiar, heavy crunch of a car driving where no plow had gone yet. It was coming from behind the building, from the direction of the old road. Every instinct I had told me to get up, open the booth door, and go look. Not for any noble reason, just because we are curious creatures and hate not seeing what is making a sound. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles ached and stayed where I was. The crunch grew louder, then passed under the subtle hum of the cameras over the in-between zone. For a moment, it felt as if the car was driving right alongside the building, invisible on any of the feeds. Then the light changed. I saw it on the snow first. The flat yellow of the overhead lamps was joined by another glow, softer and bluer, swinging gently as it moved. Headlights. From my position, I could see the entrance of the main lanes clearly. If a car was approaching from either side, it would appear within seconds. Nothing did. But the new light kept moving, sliding slowly across the snow, as if a car was circling a structure that was not there. The logs chimed again. Old line, blue sedan. Direction, unknown. That last word should not have been possible. The system always knew whether a car was entering or leaving. There is no such thing, officially, as a vehicle moving in some other direction. Unknown. The camera feed for the back lot flickered and went out for a heartbeat. When it came back, the angle had shifted. For a second, just one strange, clear second, I saw an older version of our port. The canopy was a different shape, the booths a different style. Our flag had fewer stripes. Their flag had a different shade. The snow looked almost the same, though. Snow does not care about dates. Under that older canopy, a dark blue sedan sat idling. Its headlights glowed a washed-out yellow, not the sharp white of modern bulbs. Frost rimed the edges of the windshield in delicate feathers. There were shapes inside, behind the glass. 3 of them, 1 in front, 2 in the back. Their faces were blurred not by any glitch, but by motion, like they were constantly turning towards something I could not see. Then the feed snapped back. The back lot was empty. Just our building, our cameras, our drifted snow. The chime sounded again, loud against the humming quiet. This time, the entry that popped up on my screen did not say, "Old line." It said, "Lane 1, direction, southbound." I jerked my head up, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. From the US side, my side, the road leading to the crossing was completely empty. No headlights in the distance, no engine noise. But from the Canadian side, out of the curtain of falling snow, headlights emerged. They were wrong in a way I felt before I could articulate. They were too round, too warm in color, like the beams from an older car. They did not have that bluish bite modern lights carry. The sedan rolled slowly along the in-between zone, following the lane lines as if it had done this route many times. Its paint was a dull, deep blue, the color of an old winter coat that has seen too many seasons. I watched it approach through the glass, my breath shallow. The barrier arm in my lane was down. The light above it glowed red. On their side, the barrier arm was up, but there was no officer at their booth window. Their building looked sealed, lights on inside but no movement. The car eased to a stop just before my barrier. Its engine rattled softly. I could see the driver now, a man, middle-aged, wearing a jacket with a shearling collar. His hair was dark with a few scattered gray strands. His face lined in the way of someone who has spent a lot of time on the road. He smiled at me and lifted one hand in a half wave, like this was just another stop on a familiar route. The shapes in the back seat did not resolve fully. 2 figures, one slightly smaller than the other. Their faces were turned toward me, but the glass and the light made them unreadable, as if the camera glitches had followed my vision into real life. I thumbed the intercom button with a hand that did not feel entirely steady. "Good evening," I said, or at least I tried to. My voice sounded tinny and thin coming back to me through the speaker. "Citizenship." The driver smiled wider. "US," he said, answered. "Heading home." His voice crackled through the speaker with a faint hiss, like the radio static I sometimes heard on old tapes. Behind him, the passengers were very still. "Where are you coming from?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly toward the other side. "Canada," he said, "same as last time." "You do not remember?" A little snake of cold slid down my spine. I told him I did not, that we see a lot of cars. I asked for his plate and his passport. He recited the plate number without looking back, and it matched the one on my screen. The one that had been bouncing back and forth on the old line all night. He did not reach for any documents, though. He just kept his hands on the wheel, fingers resting lightly, as if they were on a steering wheel that would not move if he asked it to. From the back room, my radio crackled. "Do not lift the arm," Dawson's voice said quietly into my earpiece. "Not yet." I glanced at the console. The system had logged the sedan in lane 1 as waiting for inspection, but there was a strange icon next to it. A little triangle with an exclamation mark inside, the way the system sometimes flagged a mismatch in data. I tabbed over to the detailed view. It showed the car's plate, make, model. It also showed a history. Under crossings, There was a long list of entries. All of them were at the old line. Dates stretched back years, but the departure column for most of them was blank. Only a handful of the oldest entries showed a clear exit. After a certain point, they were just arrivals that never generated matching departures. The most recent entries, the ones from that very night, were different. They showed the car arriving and leaving in rapid succession. Arrival, departure, arrival, departure. As if some part of the system was trying to correct an error by filling in missing pieces, but did not know how. Have you ever had a document open on your computer that keeps auto-saving the wrong version of itself until you are not sure anymore which draft is real? That was what the screen felt like. The driver watched me with patient eyes. "Everything all right, officer?" he asked. Behind the calm in his voice, there was a faint hint of something else. Not fear, not arrogance, a kind of resigned curiosity, like he was used to this conversation going badly. "Where are you heading to in the States?" I asked, because that was the script, and I needed something normal to hold on to. He named my town. Not the nearest big city, not some random place down the interstate. My town. The border town where I had grown up, where I still lived. I told myself that was not impossible. We got locals crossing all the time. Not everyone who lives near a border is on a first-name basis with the officers. But then he said my street, the one I lived on. Then my house number. He said it so casually, as if he had just looked at it on a card, as if he was reading it off my own license. I did not ask how he knew. I was not sure. I wanted the answer. Back in the booth, the printer stuttered and spit out a thin strip of paper. That sometimes happens when the system wants a hard copy of something, so you can hand it to someone or keep it for a file. Usually boarding forms or secondary inspection slips. I glanced at it. It was a crossing receipt, the kind that sometimes gets stapled to paperwork when there has been a manual override. Under officer name, it listed mine. Under direction, it said inbound. Under lane, it said old line. The timestamp was a few minutes in the future. I stared at that number, my heart beating in my throat. The man in the sedan leaned slightly forward. "We have been driving this stretch a long time," he said. "Sometimes we make it, sometimes we do not." His eyes flicked toward the in-between zone. The snow out there had changed. Instead of falling straight down, it seemed to curl and twist, as if there were invisible currents moving through it. In the Canadian building, the lights flickered once. For a heartbeat, the windows looked boarded. Then they were clear again. My earpiece hissed softly. "Listen to me," Dawson whispered. "You need to tell him he cannot cross here. Not tonight. Tell him the lane is closed. All lanes are closed." I did not know how to say that in a way that made sense. "Sir," I managed, saying the word the way we are taught, firm but polite. "There is an issue with your lane reference. I am not able to process you through this crossing. You will have to return to the Canadian side and report to an officer there." He tilted his head slightly, as if he had heard different words than the ones I spoke. "We tried that once," he said softly. "It did not go well." The figures in the back seat shifted. I could see them more clearly now, but the clarity did not help. They looked like people seen through frosted glass. The outline of shoulders, the curve of a face, the glint where eyes should be. But there was something wrong with the way they reflected the light. It was as if they were in a slightly different frame of time than the rest of the scene. I asked, automatically, if they had had anything to drink, if there were any weapons in the vehicle, if they were transporting goods of value. The routine questions felt meaningless and small against whatever was happening, but they were all I had. The driver answered with a calm that did not reach his eyes. "No, officer," he said. "No alcohol, no weapons, No purchases. Just trying to get back. Back where? I almost asked. Back to my town. Back to their home. Back to a road where the line behaved. You do not want to be between ports when things glitch, he added, almost as an aside. Not officially with either flag. Have you ever been stuck between two decisions long enough that you feel like the world is shrinking around you? That was how it felt in that booth, my hand hovering near the control for the barrier arm, my eyes on the strange car, my supervisor's voice in my ear, my own name printed on a slip of paper that had not happened yet. You are not on the manifest, I said, grasping for something solid. Your last recorded crossing is years old. He smiled in a way that made my skin crawl, not because it was creepy, but because it was so tiring. The system does not like to admit when it loses track of people, he said. The snow in the in-between zone thickened, swirling in little eddies that seemed to orbit invisible points. The lane lines were almost completely covered now, the border paint only a faint whisper. In the back room, I heard a faint beeping through my earpiece, as if other alarms were lighting up on Dawson's console. He spoke again, his voice more urgent now. Do not move that barrier, he said. If you open it, you are inviting whatever the system thinks this is into our lane. And once something has a clean record here, it is very hard to shake. I could feel the driver watching me, like he could somehow hear the voice in my ear even through the glass and static. He lifted one hand slightly, palm up, a small pleading gesture. We have been turned around so many times, he said. The kids get tired. The figures in the back seat shifted again. One of them lifted its head, and for a second I thought I saw my own eyes in that blurred face. My own expression. The one I make in the mirror when I am too exhausted and just trying to get through one more shift. My stomach lurched. I looked down at the printed slip. Next to the officer name, the system had added something. A second line, faint, but there. It said, the secondary inspector, unknown. The timestamp ticked over by a single minute. I had the sudden, irrational feeling that if I stood in that booth long enough, the system would decide that I had processed this crossing, whether I touched the controls or not. It would log my badge, my name, my lane. It would write a version of events where I had raised the barrier, checked the trunk, waved the car through. And if the system believed it, the world might try to match. My voice came out rough when I spoke next. I am closing this lane, I said. All traffic is suspended due to weather and systems issues. You need to return to the Canadian side now. The driver's smile faded slowly. He looked past me, toward some point over my shoulder. For a second, a bitter little smile flickered over his face. They said that last time too, he murmured. He put his hands back on the wheel, both of them, 10 and 2, like someone taking a test. The engine revved slightly. Then he did something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. He bowed his head, just a little, as if accepting something he did not like but could not change. The figures in the back seat bowed theirs too, in the same small, synchronized motion. He put the car in reverse. The sedan slid backward through the snow without leaving tracks. The flakes passing under its tires never seemed to compress. It retreated along the lane, through the swirling storm, back into the haze of the in-between zone. For a moment, I could see its taillights, dull red dots in the white. Then they were gone. The logs on my screen ticked again. Old line, blue sedan, direction, unknown. Then the entries began to collapse. I watched as the long list of crossings associated with that car first blurred, then condensed. Pairs of arrival and departure merged into single lines, then vanished. In the end, only one remained, an entry from many winters ago, marked as the arrival at the old line. No departure. Under the officer's name, the space was blank. Under remark, there was a single word: pending. The strip of paper in my hand had changed. My name was still there, but the timestamp now matched the present moment exactly. Under direction, it said, shift completed. Under lane, it said 1. Under comments, there was a short note: no contact made. My knees felt weak. I lowered myself into the chair before they could give out. In my ear, Dawson exhaled slowly. "You did the right thing," he said. "Sometimes the system tries to reconcile things that should stay unreconciled." I wanted to ask what would have happened if I had raised the barrier, if I had let the car roll forward, across the painted line, into our lane. Would the people inside have stepped out, solid and whole? Would the logs have quietly updated to pretend they had always been tracked? Would I have seen my own street reflected in their eyes? I did not ask. Some answers feel like doors you should not knock on. The rest of the shift passed in a strained quiet. No more ghost alerts, no more flickering cameras. Outside, the snow eased into a fine mist. Just before dawn, the first real car of the morning rolled up. A local truck, the driver yawning, heading to work on the other side. He handed me his passport with a tired smile, and everything about it felt reassuringly normal. I checked his documents, asked the routine questions, and wished him a safe drive. When my shift ended, I signed out, handed over the log, and stepped into the pale morning light. The snowbanks along the lanes had a pinkish glow from the rising sun. I walked around the side of the building toward the back lot. The maintenance path to the old crossing was drifted over, with only a faint depression showing where people had walked in other seasons. I knew I should not go down it. Dawson's warning echoed in my head. Do not go out back if you hear a car. There was no sound now, though. Just the distant caw of a crow and the soft creak of ice. I stopped at the edge of the path, where the pavement ended and the weeds began. Farther on, past a shallow dip and a stand of trees, I could just make out the top of the rusted barrier arm at the old line. It was half buried in snow, a broken limb reaching toward an empty road. The wind shifted, carrying a smell of exhaust that did not belong to any present car. For a heartbeat, the air shimmered. I thought I saw taillights through the trees. Just 2 red dots, hovering, waiting. Then the shimmer passed, and there was only the blank sky and the skeleton of the old road. I went home and slept badly. Within a few months, I applied for a transfer to a different job altogether, away from the border. People assumed it was for career reasons, and I let them. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I dream that I am in a car in the snow, my hands on the wheel, my family in the back seat, driving back and forth along a strip of road that never quite reaches either country. The radios in the dash speak in voices that sound like mine and not mine, arguing over which lane is open. When I wake up, I always check my passport in the drawer. The stamps are exactly what they should be. Trips to Canada, trips back, nothing more. But tucked into the back sleeve, there is a thin strip of paper I do not remember saving. It is blank, except for a faint line down the middle, and near the bottom, One word stamped in ink so faded it almost is not there. Pending. Have you ever watched a line on a map and felt it watching you back? If you ever drive a lonely border road at night and decide to use a small crossing instead of the big busy ports, pay attention to the lanes your system shows you. If the console mentions an old line, or a lane that the officers tell you does not exist anymore, do yourself a favor. Smile, nod, and go back during the day. And if you ever find yourself in the in-between zone, between the booths, with snow curling in the headlights, and a car behind you flashing its lights, or a road beside you that the map does not show, ask yourself one question. Are you sure the system knows which side you belong on? Or is it still deciding, one ghost entry at a time? This was Spooky Universe. If this story followed you into the dark, tap like, subscribe, and stay with us for more nights like this. Sleep carefully tonight, and remember, the story is over, but the shadows are still here, waiting for the next time you press play.